Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to be here today to shine some light on sexual blind spots that you may not even know you have. So I'm here with an amazing guest, Bryan Stacy. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Bryan left a career in corporate consulting to pursue a really big, dream to change sexual health, culture, and behavior. And in 2011, fear and embarrassment left him unable to address some obvious symptoms he was having, causing testicular cancer and chlamydia to go undiagnosed and untreated for months. So what I'm really appreciating, Bryan, about you being here is, you have a very personal stake in this business that you've created that I'll say more about in a moment. But I just want to thank you, first of all, for being so vulnerable and then for making it safe for men to be vulnerable too.
Yeah, it took a serious shock to the system. This was not a topic that I was ever comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
And I think my story is pretty similar. Maybe we'll dive into it. But I grew up in a household that, sex wasn't something you did until you're married. And I wasn't, technically allowed to have sex or really even think about sex or even intimacy. And so while it was something as I got a little bit older, I did, it was not something I was comfortable talking about. And it was this shock to the system that you mentioned, testicular cancer and chlamydia at the same time, that really got me thinking differently about it.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Which led to, and we'll go into your story, but which led to you co-founding Beam Health, which is an app that gives people access to sexual health doctors, the ability to get tested for STDs, and then share these results with their partners. And it sounds like they don't actually have to, they can do this anonymously, right? They don't have to walk into a doctor's office necessarily.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And what we found is what we identified, and for myself too, a lot of the barriers for maybe why I wasn't getting tested and checked out, and including my testicular cancer symptoms. So I started to ask myself, what could be a better, less, how can we eliminate some of these barriers to get more people talking about this?
Right. Which ultimately, gives people more of a confidence and to have a happier and healthier sex life and, make better decisions. I mean, I've been part of a lot of conversations around consent and how do you have that conversation of, okay, what protection are you using, or what tests have you taken in the past couple of years? And, how do we know what each other's history is? And that can be a really awkward conversation. So, I'm also appreciating that you co-facilitate men's groups in New York on sexual confidence and masculinity. So much. So thank you for covering this whole range, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, so happy to spread the word. It may be a topic that I wasn't comfortable talking about before, but now I love it.
Now you are, right? And you've spoken to thousands of people about this. So tell us, you alluded to this some, right? Your upbringing and the Christian upbringing and not being allowed to have sex, and then where you actually got chlamydia and testicular cancer and didn't know it. So tell us a little bit about how this whole thing went down that blew up your life.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Chicago, a Christian family, and the belief and the teaching there is not to have sex until you're married, and I took that as fact. And there's a lot of different stories I could tell, but one is, as I was growing up, we'd be watching a movie and you see somebody kiss on screen, and you're watching the movie with your parents, and so I did what I thought was right, which was cover my eyes. Right?
Wow.
And every once in a while I would peek and see somebody kiss, and I felt like I was doing something bad. And so extrapolate that as I got a little bit older into real life, where I started having more intimate relationships.
And this is how old are we talking?
This is, well, it could be as young as in high school when I had my first kiss or make out session or even sex. And I think I'm doing something wrong. So this time, instead of me just peeking between the cracks of my fingers, now I'm actually doing it.
Right. Well, and so you actually didn't wait until you got married to have sex.
I did not. No, I did not. And
then as you started having sex, this makes so much sense, right? It sounds like you had this feeling like, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be doing this, or right. That guilt feeling. Yeah.
And not only that. So yes, that's exactly how I felt. But then I also had a judgment with anybody I was with.
Of them or yourself, or both?
Both. Yeah. Well, I'm not supposed to do this, but you're not supposed to do this. Like, we're doing something bad together. And so it's this bad secular cycle of beliefs that make this something that is shameful and causes behaviors in me. And one of those behaviors is, when I was in college, I found something that a lot of people find in college, which is alcohol. And what I didn't realize unconsciously, the reason I enjoyed it so much is because I could get completely out of my head, worry about what rules I'm breaking or how bad I feel about it, and just do it.
Yep. Wow. Okay. So you started having sex, even though it was, bad and wrong for your family. And it was you weren't supposed to be doing it. And then what happened from there? Like, can you help us make the jump to, if there's anything important you want us to know too, before you got testicular cancer diagnosed, or what happened in that moment?
Sure. So throughout college, and then after college, if you would have asked me back then, like, how's your sex life? How you feeling about it? I would have said everything is really good. I am doing great. There's no problems whatsoever. Thanks for asking.
Wow. So you weren't totally aware of all of those judgments and all of that guilt, or were you just not talking about it?
I either was too embarrassed to talk about it. There was definitely an element of that. And there was a lot of unconscious behaviors, thoughts that had not surfaced yet.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's how I operated. So whether it was through, the use of alcohol or other types of behaviors that helped me get out of that mindset a little bit. But what is that, right? That creates an unconscious space when I'm completely drunk having sex, right? And it was no wonder I enjoyed, whether it was traveling for work or going to a bachelor party, because those were opportunities to get out of my head and go enjoy. So fast forward to, I was 30 years old, and I started feeling some pain in my left testicle. And I did what a lot of guys do, and that's nothing. Right.
Oh God, it just breaks my heart. You guys are taught to be so strong and have it all together and not have any problems, that it's like it's so easy to ignore it from that context.
It's easy to ignore it and even avoid it.
Right.
So for me, there was a symptom, but I was like, this is probably something that's going to go away. If it's really something, it's going to persist. And then you get into, what could this be? Right? Could it be cancer? Maybe, who knows? Could it be HIV? Maybe I have HIV. Your head goes to crazy places. And then you get to a point, at least I did, where I'm like, maybe I don't want to know. What if this is something really bad? Maybe I just don't pay attention to it. It'll go away. Yeah. And now we're talking about something that is sexual in nature. So I'm already uncomfortable talking about it. It's something that could affect my performance and viewpoint on who I am, like what my identity is as this sexual creature. And that's, at that point in time, that's where I got my power from.
I was going to say, right? I mean, that's at that point in time, at that age, that's pretty much a lot of where we get our identity from.
Completely. And whether there was shame attached to it or not, it didn't matter, because that's what I was doing. I was the guy that would go out and could have random sex and enjoy myself that way. Completely messed up.
God, I'm actually even trying to imagine what it's like to, it's like that fall from grace in a way, or that sense of like, oh my God. I mean, I actually, had I don't think I've ever talked about this in here, but I used to have, and still do sometimes, pelvic floor muscle pain. And when it first happened, I'm remembering like I couldn't actually have sex for a little while. It was so painful. It was like glass breaking. And I didn't know, like, did I have cancer? Did I have something, what was going on? And so I'm kind of relating to that moment of suddenly the whole reality shifts. But now I'm also imagining as a man, right, where you're getting your sense of power, and I can go out and have these conquests, and this is what men talk about as being manly and all of that. I mean, to lose that suddenly, or to question that suddenly, is huge.
To question it, and then knowing there's a way to confirm it or not confirm it. And so when you're talking about the family jewels, or go grow a pair, have a sack, right? All these things they're languages that we use.
Yeah.
And so what happened for me is I started to have these symptoms, and I didn't do anything for about 3 months. A friend of mine called me. He's a urologist, to make dinner plans. And at the end of that conversation, I said, hey, can I ask you something? And I told him what was going on. And that day he got me into the hospital to get checked out. Even at that point, I was still uncomfortable talking to even a friend about this that had the right information. When he told me what to do, I didn't want to go do it. I had every excuse in the world. So I just put my suit on. I'm going into the office. I'll take care of this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it was with his persistence that he said, you need to take care of this now. And so I went in, and that day I was diagnosed with testicular cancer.
Wow.
And also when they did the blood test, it came back I also had chlamydia.
Oh my God.
So that was the bomb that happened. That said, there was a lot of like, well, what does this all mean?
Yeah.
And so through the process, which I'm sure we'll get into, is I started to ask myself a lot of questions. And when you're diagnosed with cancer, one of the first questions you ask is, am I going to die? What's my survival rate? And then you start asking the secondary questions. Will I still be able to have kids? Will I still be able to perform? What's it going to look like having just one nut? What is the surgery anyways? Do you cut into the sack and pull it out, or is there a different way that it happens? So a lot of questions go in.
Yeah.
And one of those questions for me was, why was it so hard for me to talk about this?
Yeah.
Why was it so hard for me to take action? And so everything I've done since then really addresses those questions. And what I found is that it's not just testicular cancer. It's all the beliefs that we grow up with, whether it's influenced by faith, by family, by friends, that are just ingrained into us for a long period of time, that it feels completely normal and natural until a bomb drops.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing with my company, with the talks that I'm doing with my friend Dominic, or some of these men's circles, is instead of waiting for that bomb to drop, maybe we can become a little bit more aware just through some conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of blows my mind, right, that you're talking to your friend who you've known for a while, who's a urologist, and still, right, it's not till the end of the conversation, and it's uncomfortable to actually say, hey, I'm suffering, I'm struggling, I'm in pain, there's this thing, I don't know what to do, I don't know what this is, I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it ties in all the ideas of our classic, or I've even heard the term toxic masculinity, because it's about sex, it's about my identity at that point, it's about talking to a friend about something that's very vulnerable, that I should be able to take care of things on my own. And so all of that plays in. And that's why, the company that I run, we test for STDs, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. And so my belief is, until we start addressing some of these beliefs that we, a lot of times, don't even know we have, the problem doesn't get solved. There's still going to be the shame and stigma associated with talking about this with a partner, or getting tested for STDs, or even on the pleasure side of things, knowing what we want or admitting to what we want.
How do you start to address, with your company, how did you start to address these beliefs and habits and patterns that we develop?
Well, what I started realizing is that it turns out that I'm not that weird. Maybe I'm a little bit unique because I have one nut, but I'm not
Right.
that strange in my beliefs and behaviors.
Yes.
And so when I started talking with people about I wrote a blog when I was going through chemotherapy, and that blog opened me up to a lot of conversations with people about their own sexual health. And it turns
Mm-hmm.
out that there's a lot of similar thoughts. So I heard some funny stories, some sad stories around sexual health. And I said, wow, this is not just a Bryan thing. This is not just a me thing. This is an everybody thing.
Wow.
And it's universal. So then what is it? What can we do? Why is it that it's so strange for us to talk about these sort of things?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I think I forgot your question here, but that's the path that I decided to go down. What was the specific question?
Yeah, well, the question was, and you just came back to it, right? Why is it so strange to talk about these things, and what are you guys doing with your company to actually help people talk about them?
Yeah, there's often the fear is that there's not a safe space to have these conversations. The benefit of having the conversation is outweighed by the risk of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so put yourself in a situation where maybe you're with a new partner. And as a guy, sure, I could ask, when's the last time they've been tested? Maybe I don't even want to use a condom, but what are they going to think about me if I tell them I've been tested recently? Is that going to kill the mood? Are they going to think that I'm a slut, or I get around too much if I tell them that I've been tested recently? And so the risk is just too high. And similarly, I've talked to a lot of my gay guy friends. They don't like going in to see the doctor because there's a lot of judgment and shame.
Yeah.
In talking with those doctors about, why are you doing what you're doing? You know, how could you do that? Don't you know what it's doing to your body and your psychology? And like, yeah, I just want to get tested. And so all of these interactions that we have, there's this huge risk associated with it, and we don't know that we're in a safe space. And so what I've done, whether it's through this app that tests for STDs, whether it's through these conversations that we bring up in a very direct way, that people know that it's a safe space to have this conversation. And so that's really what I consider myself to be doing, whether it's in a digital space or a physical space, to create some safeness, to have these conversations, to say that, you know what, you're not weird. You're not strange that you feel this way. Most of us do. So let's talk about it. And
I love that.
This spans more than just STDs. This event that we hold here in New York monthly called the Discerning Dick. It explores the relationship with men and their penises. Yeah. And we talk about things like masturbation. And guys are like, why in the world would I go to an event to talk
do guys come? Are they coming?
About masturbation? It's crazy. Why would I do that? I've been doing this since I've been 9 years old. If there's one thing I'm an expert in this world, it's masturbation. I don't need to go. Thank you very much. But here's the thing. Yes, we've been doing since we're like 9 or 10 years old. And how often do we check in with ourselves and understand why? Why are we masturbating? What are the triggers that are associated with masturbating? What are the repercussions of masturbating? Is there an energetic one? Do we feel less energized? Do we feel like bad afterwards? Have you ever tried not masturbating for 10 days just to see what happens? And so we start breaking those patterns, breaking those thoughts, breaking those beliefs, things that we've been operating on for years and years and years and years, maybe 20, 30, 40 years.
God, I love it. I love it because part of what happens, right, as you start to really ask these questions, I mean, it takes you to such deep places, right? What are my motivations, and what am I valuing, and how am I spending my time? And, you know, where does my energy come from? And all of this, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And Shannon, when we start asking these questions, and this is exactly what happened to me. My thing started with sexual health, but I went down the rabbit hole of these questions. Yeah. And they go to, I've done a lot of the men's circles as it relates to Me Too. And we have to ask ourselves questions around, do we feel as though sex is conquering a woman? Do we feel like we have to chase them? Do we believe that they actually want sex and enjoy sex?
Right.
Where do these
a lot of men I work
come
with
from?
Yeah, a lot of men I work with. That's an interesting one where, we start talking about what they want. And I love that you covered the spectrum too of, everything from STDs to desires, right? So a lot of men, when we start talking about sex and their desires and we get to the root of some of this shame, it's this idea often that, I'm going to say women in this case for the heterosexual man, but it could be anyone, right? That other person or partner doesn't necessarily want it. And especially with women, that it's like, oh, women don't necessarily like sex or don't want sex, or there's part of me forcing myself on her. these old beliefs. And it just brings me back to those, even elementary school days where I can't believe how little we get educated or have these conversations with grown adults, right? Where we learn from magazines and peers and porn, and it's crazy.
And most of what you're talking about is fear-based. It's either biological base.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here's the penis. This is what this looks like, right? Here's the testes do, and the vas deferens, and everything else. So it's very biological.
Yeah.
They take the human and the energetic element out of it.
Yeah, the emotional connection.
Or it's fear-based.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I've tried to do with my company, Beam, where we're not scaring people.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to die, right? But it's a good idea to have a conversation. It's a good idea to wear a condom. But you're probably not going to die. So let's stop pretending that this is this huge fear-based thing, and that's why you need to get tested.
Uh-huh.
I when I eat food, I brush my teeth. When I drive a car, I get my oil changed every 3,000 miles or so. Like, these are just things I do. And when I have sex, I get tested.
Uh-huh.
So I think that these are the mindsets, the beliefs that we don't even know we really realize that we're operating with.
Yep.
That until challenged, they continue going that way.
Well, right. And until challenged, we don't necessarily realize how they're disempowering us.
Right. And how we're living a very limited life. I love the way you put that, because I can tell you right now that as much, quote, fun as I had in, let's say, my late 20s and early 30s in meeting different people and going out and being that guy that can go talk to people, like the fulfillment aspect of that just wasn't there except for brief moments.
Yeah.
Now,
how's it different now? What are you noticing?
Yeah, I'm currently dating somebody in a monogamous relationship, and our connection, both intimate and otherwise, is way more valuable, and I've learned way more about myself, and I feel more fulfilled in that than all those other interactions combined before. And I think if I would have realized that, if I would have been open enough to understand that, I'd probably be down that path a lot sooner. And so the tough part of this conversation, especially when we're talking to guys, is these beliefs and behaviors have actually gotten us pretty far as what we feel is good. And what is, quote, successful. And so when we talk to these guys about having these different beliefs and behaviors, it's not until they come to the realization on their own that they're scared that somebody might, they might have their own Me Too moment. And what I mean by that is, just to be clear, is, somebody accuses them of something that they didn't even realize was something that they did, or that offended them, or what have you.
Yep.
And I feel like that's the tough part with guys, is we don't know that it can be better. Because our behaviors have gotten us to a place that is good enough, or good as far as we know right now, and that there is a better way. And so what I'm working on is showing guys that there's a way better way out there. I promise you, take the leap of faith, and in this model, in these beliefs, you get what you want more often, easier, and guess what? So does the other person.
Well, I'm so aligned with you there. And I often find it challenging to actually put into words the difference between, having that kind of mind. It's not just about sex, but sex is a concrete way to talk about it. And the difference between that kind of drunk or mindless or even, just disconnected sex versus everything that can open up when you have this deep intimacy and emotional connection and physical connection, and those parts are waking up. And something you just said pointed to it. What did you say? Take a leap of faith, right? I mean, that's a really terrifying, I think, leap of faith for a lot of people to take. And what I see with men is it seems like what could be on the other side is never having sex again, or being belittled, or all of these things.
Less manly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that, because leap of faith does sound scary.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it requires faith. Second of all, I have to leap into it. Like, that does sound scary. So let's reframe that.
Okay.
Let's experiment. I can keep living my life exactly how I live it, but let's experiment. Let's just test the waters and see if there is a better way.
Oh, I like that.
Because I feel like when we get into that, that's where guys say, wow. And it's been really funny. So I'll tell some personal stories here. But
great.
when I started to come to some of these realizations, and I was at a bachelor party recently with some friends, and they're like, well, let's see how Bryan operates when he's, Mr. Truthful and in monogamous relationship, but we're at a bar and da da da. And I said, guys, this is really simple for me. I'm just going to say the exact truth. I'm going to tell people exactly what I feel and what's going on. And they're like, well, no woman's going to talk to you, da 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 da. And it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's just the opposite, because we can feel each other out. We can know to a certain extent where people are coming from. Yeah. And when there is that vulnerability, honesty, and almost interestingness, yeah, it transcends, right? People can feel that. So yeah, it's not scary. We can experiment with it. And I think when people experiment with it, they'll see a better path.
Well, a couple of things I love about that. I mean, one, being a woman, I know the difference. I know what it feels like when someone's being genuine, when a man's being genuine, or when he's kind of trying to play me, and I know there's a lot out there in the pickup world and whatever that women can't tell. And I mean, whatever, I'll just say it's very obvious. And women who, women who you want to really be with, and women who are high quality women, like, we feel the difference. And I think that is one of the fears too, right? If I'm honest, if I say the right thing, this is out of the bedroom, even just in a bar or meeting a woman. If I say these things, somehow I'm going to be looked at, like you said, as less manly. But the experiment piece is so great, right? Because it doesn't mean, okay, I've got to completely give up this one way of life, of connection, of conversation, of sex that I've been doing it. But what if I do try this new way, every once in a while for a little bit, and see, okay, what happens here?
And here's the fun part, is that this new way doesn't mean what you get is different. So no. I'm not saying you need to settle down and get into a monogamous relationship and just have faith it'll work out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're out there, you're having one night stands, great. You can keep that up. But you can also do it in a much more connected and conscious way. You can do it in a much more honest and vulnerable way. My guess is that you're going to have way more fun than you were having before. And so will the other person. So that's the experiment. The experiment is not change your entire lifestyle. I wouldn't want anybody to do that. That does sound scary. Mm-hmm. What I'm offering is experiment with some of these different beliefs and understanding where you're coming from, and work on connection. And when that happens, whoo.
Yeah. Okay. What are some of the other things that have happened for you?
Oh gosh.
That you're willing to speak of, I guess.
Yeah. So when you ask that question, do you mean some of the beliefs that have changed, or some of the actions?
No, I mean, you said you have some funny stories, or some stories of, things that have kind of challenged your beliefs.
Yeah.
Any examples that you can give to give a man a little faith or hope as he's, experimenting or taking a leap?
Sure. So one thing is, what are we allowed to talk about? What are we not allowed to talk about? As it pertains to either meeting new people, or even in a relationship.
Right. In a partnership.
And so I was with a group of guys recently, and one guy I knew was married, and he was on Tinder. And I said, oh, interesting. I said, like, why are you on Tinder? He said, well, I like just to see what's out there. Like, I'm not doing anything, not meeting up with anybody. I said, oh, cool. Is that something your wife knows about, or is it something you do on your own? Uh-huh. No judgment, just curiosity. And he said, no, of course she doesn't know. Like, should kill me if I knew. And I said, oh, interesting. Okay. He goes, all right, well, Mr. Honesty, like, what do you do in your relationships that maybe your significant other wouldn't like? Mm-hmm. I sat back and said, oh, nothing. I am completely transparent, and that's something I value about our relationship. And then as I sat back, with my arms above my head, being very proud of myself, I was like, ooh, there is that one. There is that. Do I want to address that or not? Uh-huh. And what that was for me was, over the years, dating women, we've created some, let's say selfie videos or sexting pics that I had over the years collected a stash over. And every once in a while, maybe once every 2 months, I'd pull out the old external hard drive. I'd take a look at that with no attachment to the other person in the video or in the photo. But for me, it was an interesting piece. It was an interesting, like, oh, that's what it was like to have sex 10 years ago, right? And so once they brought this up, I never thought I was doing something wrong or anything until they asked me the question, what are you doing, right? What is it that maybe your significant other would be upset that you do? And so now I had a choice. I said, well, now that this is in my consciousness, right, is this something I want to continue doing?
Tell her, or am I going to keep hiding?
Do I just, I mean, here's the option on the table, right? So to run the spectrum here, I could delete it and just be done with it. I could just stop looking at it. That's fine. We came up with one idea we called the Frodo option. So Frodo's from Lord of the Rings, and he carried the ring, right? A heavy burden to, I think it was Mordor or something like that. And so the Frodo option was leave it on the external hard drive, password protect it, give it to a friend, let them hang on to it. And if I get married, burn it. If I break up, they can give it back to me, and now I still have it.
Oh my God. Okay. So what did you do?
That was the Frodo option. Another option is to just talk to her about it. And say, hey, like, this is something I'm doing. It's something I've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. And I don't think it's a big deal. I'm not doing it because I love anybody else. I love you. But I just wanted you to know. And so what I ended up doing was over a period of about 2 weeks, once this came into my consciousness and I decided what I wanted to do with it, is I didn't want to get forced into deleting it. I didn't want it to be a thing where, like, she said, well, if you keep doing that, we're going to break up. I'm not going to like that. And so I wrestled with that for a 2-week period. And what I realized at the end of that 2-week period is that this is taking up way too much of my conscious space that I'm thinking about it. And maybe, just maybe, that I'm missing out on something in my current relationship because I am hanging on to this stuff. And so what I did is I decided to have the conversation with her, but this is something I was doing, and also to get her feedback on it, and also let her know that I did delete it. And then you
actually deleted it.
So I deleted it.
Wow. And I wanted talked about it.
I wanted to make sure that it wasn't something I was doing because I felt like I was forced to be doing, so that it was in alignment with me. But I did want to talk about it with her and clear that space.
Yeah.
And so we did. And I brought up this entire conversation. Yeah, I brought up this entire conversation about betrayals and agreements and stated agreements and unstated agreements that is now something that we talk about on the regular. So there was something better on the other side that I couldn't see, that I didn't know. And that is a tighter, closer connection with my girlfriend than what I've ever experienced before.
That is a fantastic example. And the empowered place that you were coming from of, okay, I'm going to actually figure out what's, in integrity for me versus, being forced to do something, or, I just love the example. And I'm imagining many men have often said to me, well, I can't say that because she's going to get pissed, or she'll do this, or she'll pull away. And I really do believe that we can have these conversations, and, we can create it. Sometimes it takes some time if you've been in a relationship where these haven't been happening. And if you're single, you have the benefit of doing this from the beginning, but where you really start having these conversations where you're not holding things over each other. You're not, holding resentments with each other. You're actually on the same team. You might get upset, right? But you're actually able to have these deeper conversations about your values and your actions and how you're loving and respecting each other. So thank you for being a man who's living that.
Yeah. And I love what you said, that if you're single or in the beginning of a relationship, these are agreements that you can do from the start.
Yeah.
Now, changing those agreements, whether they're either stated or unstated, can be a lot more difficult. So what I'd encourage any man out there listening is really be thoughtful before having that conversation. Know what your boundaries are, know what you're looking to get out of it. And also please look at the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do an entire event on how do we redo agreements that we maybe already have.
That is fantastic.
And I hear that a lot. And this comes up with porn a lot, where guys, they're like, yeah, I have a porn habit, and it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy in my house. But I do kind of want to be okay with doing it. Or maybe I am doing it in secret completely and they don't know about it. And that doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these little intricate, behaviors or things that we do that we can definitely have a better conversation of, but we need to be conscious of how we go into it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you. And, I want to say, I'm sorry you had to go through the struggles you've gone through, but as usual, right, it brings you into this place of being able to really understand and be of service. So I feel grateful for that part.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Shannon. This is great. I love getting the word out. And if any guys are interested in what are those other things out there that are either open loops or beliefs that we have that we don't even realize we have, you can definitely get in contact with me. Come to our events here in New York, and we'll be discussing any and all of them.
I love it. Yeah. Okay. And if there's a last thing that you want to leave men with that feels like, if you got off this call and you would be like, oh shit, I can't believe I didn't say that. What do you want men to know?
I think use fear as a compass to uncover what you can't see. All those little things in our lives that we want to avoid or are fearful of or don't want to have the conversation around, those are usually where we need to dive in.
Wow.
And so that's where it's at. That's where the answers lie.
That is profound. I mean, to shift from, okay, fear is something that I should either, avoid or not talk about, or it's a threat to my manliness, to actually use it as a compass and find that place inside of you to, keep moving toward your values and what matters to you and what's in integrity for you.
Yeah, that'd be a beautiful world.
Yeah. Thank you again. So people can find you on Beam, I'm guessing. And then what's your website give us both websites actually for that. And then for the New York events.
Yeah. So the best spot to get us right now is on Instagram, and you can get me at Talking Nut, just like it sounds, on Instagram. That's my personal. And then at Beam Team, that's BIEMTEAM.
Great.
For the company that I'm running for Beam.
Perfect. Thank you so much for doing this.
Cool. Thanks, Shanna.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.